You are standing in a river valley in northern China, and you can hear them coming, not marching, screaming. 400,000 men are running toward a narrow gorge, and you're one of the Qin soldiers blocking the only way out. Your commander has just told you something that doesn't make sense. The battle is already over. You won 3 days ago. These aren't enemy soldiers anymore. They're prisoners who surrendered, who laid down their weapons, who were promised their lives. But now, they're running because they've realized what's about to happen. And you're holding a shovel. If you're enjoying this, hit subscribe. We dig into the darkest corners of history most channels won't touch. The year is 260 BCE, and two superpowers are locked in a war that will decide who controls China. On one side, the state of Qin, brutal, efficient, obsessed with expansion. On the other, Zhao, wealthy, desperate, and about to make a catastrophic mistake. They've been fighting over a city called Changping for 3 years. 3 years of siege warfare, of supply lines stretched to breaking, of commanders rotated in and out as strategies fail. The Zhao forces hold the high ground. The Qin can't break through. It's a stalemate that's bleeding both kingdoms dry. Then Qin's king does something clever and unforgivable. He spreads a rumor. Not through spies or official channels, through merchants, through travelers, through the kind of gossip that feels true because it's whispered. The rumor says that Qin's general, the experienced Wang He, fears only one Zhao commander, the elderly, brilliant Lian Po. But young Zhao Kuo, the general's son who's never actually commanded troops in combat, Qin would love to face him. It's such obvious manipulation that it shouldn't work. It works. Zhao's king replaces Lian Po with Zhao Kuo, and the Qin commanders, the real ones, waiting in the shadows must have allowed themselves a smile. Because Zhao Kuo isn't just inexperienced, he's the worst kind of inexperienced. He thinks he's ready. He's studied every military text. He can recite Sun Tzu from memory. He's spent his whole life winning arguments about tactics at dinner parties. He's never watched a man's face when an arrow punches through his throat. His own father, the renowned General Zhao Kuo, once told the king, "War and theory are different things. If you must use my son, do not make him a commander." When Zhao Kuo's mother heard about his appointment, she begged the king to reconsider. The king refused. Zhao Kuo marches to Changping with confidence that radiates like heat off bronze. He immediately abandons Lian Po's defensive strategy, the one that had stalemated Qin for 3 years, and orders an offensive. He's gonna crush Qin with a decisive blow, the kind he's read about in classical texts. Qin's actual commander, Bai Qi, has been waiting for exactly this. Bai Qi is not like other generals. He erases armies. His nickname is Ren Tu, the human butcher. In previous campaigns, he's killed hundreds of thousands. Not in the heat of battle, methodically, after victory. He understands something about warfare that Zhao Kuo has only read about. Fear is a weapon that works long after swords break. When Zhao Kuo orders his massive army, somewhere between 400,000 and 450,000 men, larger than most cities to advance, Bai Qi lets them come. The Qin front line engages, then breaks. Not collapses, breaks in a controlled, rehearsed way that looks like panic. They run. Zhao Kuo's forces pursue, exactly as planned, exactly as the texts say to do when the enemy routs. Victory is so close, Zhao Kuo can taste it. He's chasing them into a valley. Behind his army, 25,000 Qin soldiers emerge from hidden positions and seal the road. Not the main road, the only road. The supply line Zhao's massive force needs to eat, to get arrows, to receive reinforcements. In a single coordinated movement, the way back disappears. Ahead, the fleeing Qin soldiers stop running and turn around. Imagine being one of Zhao Kuo's officers when you realize what's happened. You've just led hundreds of thousands of men into a natural cage. The valley walls are too steep for organized retreat. The Qin forces hold every elevated position. Your supply route is cut. You're not pursuing anymore. You're trapped, and your commander still thinks he can win this. Zhao Kuo orders his men to dig in and fortify. He sends breakout forces to punch through the encirclement. Again and again, they try. Again and again, Qin arrows turn the attempts into massacres. The Qin don't even need to attack, they just need to wait and shoot anything that moves toward the perimeter. Days pass. Then, weeks. The Zhao army starts eating the horses. When the horses are gone, they boil leather armor for whatever nutrition might be extracted. When that's gone, soldiers start looking at each other differently. Historical accounts mention cannibalism, described in the clinical language chroniclers use when reality becomes too grotesque for elaboration. 46 days into the siege, Zhao Kuo makes one final, desperate attempt to break out. He leads the charge himself because what else can he do? Stay and watch his army eat itself? He's wearing the armor of a common soldier, trying not to be recognized, trying to get close enough to the Qin lines to create a breach. A Qin archer kills him without knowing who he was. When word spreads through the Zhao ranks that their commander is dead, something breaks. Not morale, something deeper. The organizational logic that keeps an army functioning as a unit rather than a terrified mob. Officers try to maintain order, but order requires hope, and hope requires believing your commanders know something you don't. There's nothing left to know except that they're going to die here. The remaining Zhao generals make a decision. They surrender. Hundreds of thousands of men lay down their weapons in exchange for a promise. Spare our lives, let us return home, and Zhao will cede territory. Bai Qi accepts. The Zhao soldiers must have felt relief so profound it hurt. They'd survived. 46 days of starvation, of watching friends die from hunger and despair, and they'd survived. They begin the march home as prisoners, disarmed, exhausted, probably already imagining the meals they'll eat, the families they'll see again. Bai Qi is marching them toward a different kind of valley. He's calculating. 400,000 prisoners require food his supply lines can't support. They require guards his army can't spare. If they're released, they'll return to Zhao, recover, and become enemy soldiers again in the next campaign. If they're held as hostages, Zhao might negotiate, or worse, might launch a rescue operation, while Qin forces are dispersed, managing prisoners. And there's another calculation, colder than the others. Terror is force multiplication. An enemy that fears you fights worse. An enemy that knows surrender means death fights to the last, but an enemy that knows surrender might mean something worse than death. Immediate collapse becomes possible in future battles. Bai Qi calls his officers together and gives an order. We don't know exactly how he phrased it. We know what it meant. Kill them all. Not in combat, not in the chaos of battle where death arrives too fast for contemplation. Systematically. The historical record uses the term keng, buried alive. Whether that's literal or metaphor for mass execution, the result is the same. The Zhao prisoners are divided into groups. They're marched to locations around Changping, some to ravines, some to valleys, some to positions that had been prepared. Maybe they realize what's happening when they see Qin soldiers spreading out in execution formations. Maybe they realize when they hear screaming from the groups ahead of them. Maybe some of them never realize at all. 400,000 men don't die quietly. The historical accounts are sparse on details, preserving the horror through absence rather than description. But physics and human anatomy provide the rest. Even if you have thousands of soldiers executing prisoners, the mathematics of killing that many people takes time. Hours, possibly days. The ones dying first might be lucky. The ones forced to wait, listening, knowing that's a different kind of death. Some Zhao soldiers try to fight back with bare hands against armored troops with weapons. It goes exactly as well as you'd expect. Some run. In a narrow valley surrounded by Qin forces, there's nowhere to run to. Some beg. The Qin soldiers have their orders. 240 young Zhao soldiers, boys really, too young to have full beards, are spared, not from mercy. Bai Qi sends them back to Zhao to tell everyone what happened. They're not survivors, they're messages. Imagine being one of those 240. You've watched everyone you marched with die. You've heard 400,000 people scream. And now you have to walk home and describe it, knowing that's why they let you live, so the story spreads, so the fear metastasizes. When news reaches Zhao's capital, Handan, the reaction isn't military strategy or political calculation. It's grief on a scale that breaks cities. Every family has lost someone. Most have lost multiple men, fathers and sons and brothers, all gone in the same catastrophe. The chroniclers record that the sound of mourning was so loud, so pervasive, that it changed the acoustic character of the city for months. The king who appointed Zhao Kuo tries to execute the messenger who brought the news. He's stopped by advisors who point out that killing messengers doesn't change reality. Zhao Kuo's mother, who begged the king not to appoint her son, is spared punishment she'd predicted this exact disaster. The number is too large to process emotionally, so let me make it physical. 400,000 bodies. Even if you stack them efficiently, even if you're trying to hide the evidence, that's a footprint measured in acres. The location of the mass graves at Changping has been identified by archaeologists. They've found bone pits, layers and layers of human remains showing signs of traumatic death. One pit alone contained bones from an estimated 130,000 individuals. The physical evidence confirms what the historical texts describe, but it does something else too. It makes the number real. These weren't casualties absorbed into the chaos of battle. This was organized, methodical killing on an industrial scale, achieved with Bronze Age technology and human labor. Bai Qi doesn't express regret. Why would he? From his perspective, he solved a military problem. Those 400,000 men can't fight for Zhao anymore. The terror he's created will make future battles easier. Enemies will be more likely to flee or surrender under worse terms. It's brutal calculus, but it's effective calculus. Zhao never recovers. The state survives for decades more, but the loss at Changping is mortal. They can't field armies of that size again. They can't project power. When Qin eventually conquers them in 222 BCE and unifies China under the Qin dynasty, the path was cleared at Changping. Bai Qi himself doesn't live to see the unification. Years later, Qin's king orders him to lead another campaign. Bai Qi, perhaps tired or perhaps having used up all his luck, declines. The king insists. Bai Qi refuses again. In Qin culture, disobeying the king once is dangerous. Twice is fatal. The king sends him a sword and a message. You know what to do. Bai Qi kills himself. His last words, according to the records, are a question. What crime have I committed against heaven that I should die this way? Then he answers himself. At Changping, I tricked 400,000 men into surrendering and buried them. This crime is enough to deserve death. It's the closest thing to remorse he ever expresses. And even then, it's structured as cosmic justice rather than moral reflection. The massacre at Changping becomes a reference point in Chinese historical consciousness. When later generals want to describe atrocity, they compare it to Changping. When philosophers debate the ethics of warfare, Changping is the case study. It's the worst thing that can happen when you surrender the nightmare scenario that makes last stands seem rational. But there's a detail in the historical accounts that complicates the simple narrative of evil. The Qin soldiers executing prisoners, what did they think they were doing? Were they monsters? Or were they just following orders in a system where refusing meant their own death? Were they numb by the end, mechanically going through motions? Or did it get worse each day? The accounts don't tell us, because the chroniclers didn't think to ask. Soldiers were instruments of state policy. Their moral experience wasn't relevant to the historical record. But those Qin soldiers went home too. They lived the rest of their lives having done this. Did they talk about it? Did they dream about it? When Qin eventually conquered all of China, were the veterans of Changping proud of their service or silent about it? We don't know. Their psychological aftermath isn't preserved. What is preserved is this. Changping changed how wars were fought in China. Surrender became more dangerous. Battles became more desperate. The total war logic that Bai Qi employed destroy the enemy's capacity to fight by any means necessary became more common. The Qin dynasty that emerged from this era lasted only 15 years before collapsing into civil war, despite having unified China for the first time. Maybe that's coincidence. Or maybe building a state on this much trauma and fear doesn't create stable foundations. The parallels to modern warfare are uncomfortable. The logic Bai Qi used that enemy prisoners are a resource problem, that terror can be strategically useful, that expedience trumps ethics didn't die with Bronze Age China. The scale changes, the technology improves, the calculations remain. During World War II, similar logic justified similar outcomes. During the genocides of the 20th century, the same arithmetic appeared. This group is a problem. The most efficient solution is elimination. Carry out the policy. Changping isn't an ancient aberration. It's a template that keeps getting reused. And look, it worked. Bai Qi achieved his strategic objective. Qin conquered China. The tactic was successful by every military metric that mattered at the time. The moral horror doesn't change the strategic effectiveness. That's the part we don't like to think about, that atrocity can be tactically sound. That the arc of history doesn't automatically bend away from methods like this unless people actively bend it. The archaeological sites at Changping are tourist destinations now. You can visit the bone pits. There are museums explaining the battle, the tactics, the outcome. The presentations are educational, clinical, focused on military history rather than moral philosophy. The skeletons are still there. Layers of them pressed together, evidence of how densely packed the killing fields became. Some show defensive wounds, arms broken, trying to block blows. Some show execution-style trauma killed from behind, unable to defend themselves. The forensic anthropology fills in what the chroniclers left out, and every skeleton is someone who thought they were going home. Someone who survived 46 days of siege, who endured starvation and fear and the collapse of leadership, who finally received the promise of safety, who laid down their weapon and believed the war was over. Zhao Kuo's grave was eventually located. His mother had it built. The inscription doesn't defend him or explain his decisions. It just records his name and his service. Maybe that's the kindest thing history can do for catastrophic failure. Remember that the person existed without requiring them to be a lesson. The 240 boys who were sent back to Zhao to spread the story, we don't know what happened to them. Did they become soldiers again, carrying what they'd seen into future battles? Did they become monks or scholars, trying to make sense of it? Did they just try to forget and fail for the rest of their lives? The historical record moves on to other battles, other massacres, other strategic calculations. Changping is one entry in a chronicle of warfare. But if you sit with it, if you slow down and think about what actually happened in those valleys, the abstraction falls away. 400,000 individuals, each with a name, a family, a life they were trying to get back to. Each one dying in a way that gave them time to know what was happening, to understand that the promise of safety was a lie. And the soldiers carrying out the executions, also individuals, also with names, also going home to families afterward. What does it do to a person to spend days killing prisoners? What does it do to a society to know its army did this and reward the commander who ordered it? The Qin dynasty built itself on Changping and massacres like it. It created the first unified Chinese state, standardized writing, built massive infrastructure projects including early versions of the Great Wall. It's remembered as a foundational moment in Chinese history. It's also remembered for Changping. Both things are true. Progress and atrocity aren't opposites. They can be built on the same foundation. The same state capacity that creates roads and irrigation can organize mass killing with terrifying efficiency. That's the lesson Changping teaches, if we're willing to hear it. The mechanisms of civilization, organization, logistics, command structures, resource management are morally neutral. They amplify whatever intentions drive them. In Bai Qi's hands, they amplified extermination. Modern militaries study Changping for the tactical encirclement, the psychological warfare of the false retreat, the supply line interdiction. The battlefield tactics are still relevant. The ethical dimension is filed under war crimes and discussed separately, as if the two can be neatly divided. But they can't. The tactics enabled the atrocity. The encirclement created the prisoner problem that Bai Qi solved with execution. You can't teach one without acknowledging the other. There's a memorial at Changping now. It's called the Memorial Hall of the Changping Battle. Respectful, educational, focused on remembering the fallen. The displays explain the strategies, show artifacts, reconstruct the battle lines. When Qin unified China 15 years after Changping, they didn't have to fight many more battles on that scale. The reputation of Changping did some of the work for them. Enemies surrendered on worse terms or fled without fighting. Terror as a weapon has a return on investment that lasts for years. Bai Qi understood that. It's why he's remembered as one of China's greatest military commanders, and why his name is also synonymous with atrocity. Both assessments are accurate. He was strategically brilliant and morally monstrous, and ancient China rewarded him for being both. Until it didn't. Until the king who had used his violence decided he was too dangerous to keep alive. Bai Qi's forced suicide is usually framed as tragic, the great general betrayed by his own king. But there's another way to read it. The state that used him for mass killing eventually saw him as a threat and eliminated him with the same ruthless efficiency he'd employed against others. He became a problem. Problems, in Bai Qi's worldview, get solved. The sword the king sent him was the same logic he'd used at Changping, turned back on its creator. If you've made it this far, you're someone who understands that history isn't just dates and battles. It's choices and consequences that echo across centuries. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because we're not done excavating the darkest chapters that shaped our world. Thanks for watching.